All right. Here we go. We are sitting on episode 29 with Everything Teams Phone Live. And today, Brandon, we've got a special guest. I'm pretty excited about it. Why don't you do the intro? I always do the intros, Brandon. This time, I think we should toss the monologue, the dialogue over to you to do the intros because I'm always doing it.
I mean, that's because I think the comment was just made. I'm the silent smart one. not to puff my own chest or anything. That night, you're not going to ever hear me make up the intro track like you do. We got to record that and kind of spin it off into something. But no, excited to have Kevin Kieller from enableUC.com joining us. Kevin, welcome, and looking forward to the next hour talking with you.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I'm Brandon, Rick. I'm super happy to be here. It's exciting, and Brandon, you raised the bar, like you said. You've got to be saying the smartest comments, right? So I feel like this is open to the audience. They can vote afterwards. Right?
That's right. I think I just put my foot in my mouth when I said that on a live stream. Like, oh boy,
you did. We've got the comments already coming in, right? The comments, smart silent type. Here we go. We're gonna have to show that right there.
now I got to prove myself.
That's right. You'll be voted on by your answers, right?
That's right. Well, hey, I influenced the giveaway today, so. Note your comments. I might take a grudge towards them.
And that seems a little unfair, right? It's like, I don't know.
That's lovely. That's awesome. Okay, speaking of the giveaway, Kevin, last week we started doing a giveaway, and we've never done this on our show. Last week was our first week that we decided to do a giveaway. So this week we've got from our friends over at Yealink. There we go. We've got the new BH71 Pro. I've got it right in the hands already. Nice. It's only been used once, so it's fine. I pop it in a couple of years and send it off to the new people. I'm just kidding. So this week, Brandon, why don't you tell folks what they're going to have to do to get a headset from Everything Teams Phone Live?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have the formal rules, but it's ask a question that either stumps us or generates a good discussion around anything Teams Phone.
That's it. That's
it. Pretty simple rules. And if there's more than one question, I think that's where we kind of choose the one that sparked the most, either stumped us the most or sparked the best conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Exactly that. And that comment came from YouTube. So there we go. All right. Okay. Well, let's get into today's discussion. Kevin, glad you're here because we're talking about the market today, right? Yeah. We're talking about the market today. We're talking about what's happening in the space. Obviously here at Everything Teams Phone Live, we are massive proponents of Microsoft Teams. Both Brandon and I are part of G12 Communications, where we deliver Operator Connect services for organizations, all sorts of cool stuff. But there's a massive shift going on, Kevin. There's a massive shift in this industry right now. And we just made the comments in the green room essentially a little bit ago about, does the market even know that this shift is happening? We live and breathe this every day, so we see it. But does the market see what's happening?
That's a question. That's a good question. So, what I would say is back at Enterprise Connect, back in March, Brent Kelly from Omdia and I, we did a session that we looked at, Zoom and WebEx and Microsoft Teams and Ring Central. And, I think the market sees these polls that say, 80, 90% of organizations use 2 or more UCaaS providers. And everybody says, yes, we are going to be one of those. And my conclusion is that is a true statistic, but I think the people read that and they think that if you use 2 or more, they're all parity. So it's like if I use 2, 50% use A and 50% use B. And increasingly, I think the market is voting, and Microsoft is at the core. So it's like you're using Microsoft Teams and something else for some edge cases. And the truth is, why is that? Well, because people are using Outlook and Exchange for their email. They're using most larger organizations are using, Office 365. Sure, there are, I think Google Workspace, which is what I believe they call it now, it used to be G Suite. And so Google Workspace,
Right.
I mean, yeah, they have I think they're saying 5 million users or 5 million customers, but for them, it's kind of about the same, right? Because they're in the S of the SMB market, right? And
Yeah.
so, Microsoft has a lion's share of the medium to large enterprises space. So, yes, people also, it makes me laugh when I see people say, I don't know, whatever, 90% of the Fortune 500 use my product. That just means one person. Every single product in existence claims that 90% of the Fortune 500 use their product, right? But from the Microsoft perspective, I mean, if you have 100,000 people, 100,000 people are using it, not one out of 100,000, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think that the market is fundamentally shifting, and everyone who is, I'm going to say, smart from a vendor perspective, because we do two things at enableUC. We help organizations make the most of the Microsoft ecosystem, and then we help vendors strategize about how they can play a significant role with the Microsoft ecosystem. So I would say the smart vendors have figured it out, and they have some integration into Microsoft Teams. And we were talking about that, Rick, in the green room, as you say.
And that's interesting. I mean, we talk about the difference between partners and carriers, and I commented on a link that I think is Mark Volley put it up yesterday or a couple of days ago, right? And I talk about carriers' base of Microsoft knowledge is, let's just say it's here's just a layer, okay?
Right.
Partners, I feel, Microsoft partners obviously have a much deeper understanding of the Microsoft ecosystem, exactly what you do, things like that, right? So they get a much deeper understanding of the ecosystem. And carriers have come into the space, all the OC providers have come into the space, and they're excited, and they're like, okay, great. The heavens of revenue are going to open and drop money sacks all over us and customers. And it just doesn't happen that way, right? It just doesn't happen that way at all. You can be a provider in the space, but not understand how you go capture some of this market share. And the reason that I think some of the things that we did at G12 or I've done at G12 is understand the market from a customer's perspective and understand the Microsoft ecosystem better. The comment that I made was, when we took the time to understand what the customers are working for or looking for, and deliver that, then things as a carrier, things started to just really kind of open up for us. And for us as carriers too, we did not realize the power of the Microsoft ecosystem, the Power App Suite. Oh, wow. I mean, talk about for a guy that's been in telecom for 25 years, when I see the Microsoft Teams phone system and the Power Suite that you can go attach to, the Power App Suite that you can attach to the services now, it blows our mind. I mean, Brandon and I, in our spare time, are working in Power Automate just to go create cool flows. And what can we do with this? Oh, we can do this. And what, you've been in this business a long time too, Kevin. You understand, you see scenario after scenario after scenario. And when you kind of log this item in the back of your brain, you go, oh, I could deliver this functionality for this customer. I can deliver this productivity for this customer. It gets exciting. It really gets exciting. So hard for me to get excited about the other providers, the competitors like a Z or like a C and all those guys. When I look at the suite of Microsoft and just said, you know what, I think I'm just going to be sort of sucked into it and start drinking the Kool-Aid because it tastes really nice on this side.
Yeah, and I think an interesting conversation that maybe we should explore is this. At least from my perspective, in my opinion, where I observe the shift happening is that voices, from a telephony perspective and Teams phone perspective, voice is no longer the absolute critical component to a business strategy. Yes, it's important, and maybe for contact center, it is important or it is critical. But it's more of a, what I'd like to say, customers are looking for solutions and not services. And that's what we're discovering is Rick and I, we go enable Teams phone all day long from a service provider perspective, but our customers are coming to us and they're not even asking us service related questions, meaning phone service. They're asking us about the solution that can be leveraged with the addition of voice, meaning, hey, I want to do screen pop. When I get a call, I want to pop Salesforce and I want it to create a new contact record. Right. Or I want it to generate a ticket. And we're spending more time having the solution conversation with the customer than we are having here's what the service is. Because all we do is we deliver a service. So it's a really interesting shift, I think, in the marketplace as well.
Do you think voice, Kevin, this is a direct question. I got two questions for you. Do you think voice now in the Microsoft, maybe in the Microsoft, Zoom, and Cisco ecosystem as well, but in the Microsoft do you think voice is now becoming lighter, becoming more nimble, more accessible, easy to turn on? I mean, it seems like voice has always been difficult. Voice has always been, heavy. All right. A heavy technology, right? It's always been just not fluid, not easy, not automated. Do you think voice is becoming a lighter, and do you think that voice is actually now becoming just another app?
Yeah. So great question, and a lot of things, and both what kind of Brandon said and you said. And so I think a couple of things. So first of all, like carriers and operators, I think they're being dragged screaming and, like into
grudgingly
the ecosystem because they don't like it. Because quite frankly, like I deal with like big carriers and I've had people contact me like after 10 years and they're like, man, you were right, Kevin, 10 years ago when you said this Microsoft thing, we should have gotten on board. And now they've got a tile in Operator Connect. One of the whatever 60 plus or whatever the number is, right?
71.
I'm based in Canada, and so I'm just outside Toronto. So it's like there's 30 plus providers that offer Canadian service, and most of those are not Canadian based; they're international. So huge competition. So the carriers don't like it because I've talked to carriers, and like they would have like a Centrex service. Their margin was 98%. So I know Joseph Williams. One of my other hats is I lead the BC Strategies Group, which is a group of independent analysts and consultants. Joseph Williams is one of them. Like he used to work for Microsoft in the telco. He would go to telcos many years ago and try to say, hey, you should be part of this. And they'd say, no, hell no. We're making 98% margin on this. So, it's kind of like the Kodak thing, right? Like, we're selling film and everything's good until digital photography takes off. And so I feel like good for G12 because you guys have stepped up and really embraced the Microsoft ecosystem. I think if you just get your tile in there as a hold and protect move, like from a carrier perspective, I don't think that that's going to work because, back to your core question, voice is less important. I think that the analyst community, like PSTN calling, may be down by 80%, right? And most of the time, it makes me laugh because most of the time we're talking about the importance of, PSTN calling. We're doing it on a Zoom, WebEx, or Teams call, right? Which is VoIP, and it has nothing that we never touched the PSTN. Right. So I think increasingly, it is, to your point, Rick, voice is an app. It's nice to have. You see that shared device license, really, that is going to break open even more. Like Microsoft wants everybody who has an E5 to turn on PSTN calling, but it didn't make sense. You could do stuff with concurrent channels on direct routing, but you still played for the direct, the DID, where you paid $1 or $2 a month per user. And when we do analytics, which I'm a big fan of, there are, in some organizations, it's 1% of the people that have ever made or received a PSTN call. Part of the reason is because the company gives them mobile phones, and so Teams Phone Mobile is pretty interesting as well, but it's not available everywhere, or I feel people don't yet understand that. Yes, but so for sure, voice, in terms of what Teams does from a collaboration perspective, chat and persistent chat and meetings, all the stats say meetings is where business gets done, right?
Yeah.
And if somebody calls me out of the blue, whether it's on my, whether it's a Teams call, it doesn't matter what the underlying, carrier is, that I'm not probably answering that call, right?
It's true.
So,
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so follow-up question then. Okay, this is perspective here. So, do you think that we're going to run into a day, and maybe it's 3 years from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, where a business stops thinking about, hey, we need to go buy a new phone system, and thinking about more of, we need to go buy our messaging system? Like, what does our messaging system look like? I've got, and I'm going to tell you where I'm going with that in just a minute. So I'll get your thoughts on that, because I want to tell you where I think I go with this thing.
So I would say, I think already organizations are thinking about, I'm going to buy my communication system. And so, and I think in the contact center space, similar to, like, there's a bunch of statistics, similar to the statistic that says people have multiple UCaaS providers, and people read into that a positive if they're not Microsoft. Similar in the contact center space, I think people say, like, I don't know, whatever it is, like when you escalations are handled by voice, and it's like a big percentage, like 80%, let's say. I just made up that number, but it's a big number.
Yeah, yeah.
I think what people misunderstand is that's because the other modalities broke down.
Didn't work.
It's like, right? I only escalate to voice. Like, if I could go and do self-service and update my order or do whatever, or change my license, or actually have a good chat bot, as opposed to like with all this AI stuff, I mean, basically contact center still has crappy chatbots deployed, so huge opportunity. I think people say, oh, look at this, voice is really important. And it's like, yeah, just because you failed at all the other modalities. So I think even now, organizations, and certainly whatever you said, 3 years in the future, I think they're going to buy a communication system. And when they rate that, like, internally, meetings are where work gets done. I mean, you don't really have a meeting like if you're business to consumer, but that is going to be increasingly chat. And then it's going to be, VoIP, but maybe over the top if you needed to escalate, or if I needed to say, if the customer service rep said, hey, show me, like, hey, your car broke down, show me what the dash looks like, right? Or something like that. Yeah. But that's not PSTN calling, right? So
no. Well, that's exactly, and that's where I'm going with this, because the way that I think about the future here, I look at it and go, we've got all the technology we need now to revitalize or reimagine the way the customer engages with the business, right? And I think, in my personal opinion, is that it now starts with the website. And the reason I say it starts with the website, if I need to stop at an auto shop and I'm going to Google who's around me, let's just say, or I'll Bing it. For those of you that are hardcore bleed blue, I'm gonna look up a tire shop near me or whatever it is, and the contact information is going to come up there, and the contact information that people are used to doing is, let me click on it and let me get a phone call going, right? Whereas now, if you start to really kind of maneuver that sort of connectivity model to chat and engagement, a direct engagement with that business in some way, shape, or form, right? Whether it is chat or a live stream or whatever it may, not a live stream, but a direct link, a direct video chat, whatever it may be. I think that's the piece that needs to be revamped, right? And reimagined, that communications right from the website to a business. And that's the piece where you're talking about how the CCAS guys still have, crappy sort of, chat bots deployed. There needs to be some sort of mainstream, every business has, and I'll say, like in Europe, WhatsApp is very heavily used, right, in Europe, and not here in North America, or not so much in the US, let's just say, right? WhatsApp's on websites in Europe, and you can just hit the WhatsApp button and connect with the companies. Here, you can't do that. And there's a gap to be filled here in North America on how we directly connect to organizations. And I don't think it's going to be the contact center organizations. I don't think we've seen it just yet. I do think that underlying platform is Microsoft Teams, or is going to be Microsoft Teams.
Yeah, certainly for a large number of organizations, right?
Well,
so Brandon, now it's your turn to say something really smart.
So what I was, as I'm thinking through what you guys are talking about, there's still like this big stopgap, I think, that is going to prevent the kind of the sunsetting, if you will, of true PSTN calling. And that's this ubiquitous approach to communication globally, meaning I'll use the word federation, so to speak. Right. Like when you think about the telephone, it's federated worldwide. Yep. I can pick up my phone, assuming I have a plan. I can pick up my US based cell phone. You're part of North America dial plan, so obviously I could call you, but yes. I can also call someone else over in Europe or in South America or wherever. And I've got this federated network where all of the competitors have decided to play nicely together. And it's, right. regulated to a certain extent. And that to me is one of the gaps I think the business sector and even into the consumer sector is missing, is that ability to bridge the gap between, we're here preaching Teams, but, you mentioned, a swag number of 5 million people on Google Workspace.
Right.
There at some point, the question becomes, does Microsoft and say Google work together to federate the services to bring that sorry, my phone just lit up because I said Google. Do they work together to bring that unified communication, cross channel or cross boundary, I should say? Or do they, put that stake in the sand and say, we will not do that? And does that keep PSTN alive?
Yeah, that's interesting. The other federated thing is email, right? So it's like, yep. I feel like it's not only the PSTN, and quite frankly, I would imagine that email, especially when you've got things like the ability to translate, with AI and things like that, I think that that's probably more universal. I think what Rick had it right in the scenario, like, pretty much every buying decision, you get the smart. So far, 1 point for Rick and half a point. So I don't know. Anyway, but, I think you start on a website. And so, I think we all talk because we are geeks and we understand the details, like it's the plumbing. But quite frankly, if you're on a website and you click to chat, and whether it's a text chat or an audio chat, I think that and you see Teams is supporting that now, right? So you can put a little widget on your website and have that kind of audio chat, into Teams. I think that increasingly will be the way it goes, as opposed to, I like the idea of the different services interacting, and you got like Mio that tries to do that with chat and things like that. But ultimately, that is always kind of a lowest common denominator approach, right? So I don't. And
I think I don't disagree with the consumer customer journey, the way I think it will transition to that, Bing search, click, and it's maybe a WebRTC connection right from the browser natively into, say, the Teams ecosystem. Right. But I don't think I think voice from a telephony perspective, it's got a long ways to go before we ever see it irrelevant, even from a contact center perspective, because I think there's still this need to bridge company to company together behind the scenes. So the customer journey may live on Teams from the website, but if I got to go work with a vendor that's maybe not a part of Teams, I think you're still going to have that PSTN workflow for some form of communication.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if you're working, I don't know. Like I don't have, if I'm working with external people, we're not connecting over PSTN calls, right?
There's also this whole shift in generational sort of consumption. I mean, there is a shift. I mean, if you get guys like me, I say I'm an old guy already, and I like dial tone. I like the phone. I use it often because my personality type is I want to get something across. I'm gonna say it to get my point across. Probably because I can't articulate it well enough in writing. But I think that as the generational sort of kind of changes a little bit, right, into the workspace and in the consumer space, I do think that it's going to be heavily message driven. But you're right, you can't always write off voice, or you can't write off a phone number just yet. It will be one of those things that are going to be one of those, I've got to have something, I've got to have it. So I've got to have a business phone number, but boy, that's not really the way we connect anymore. The way we connect is, online and messaging and real-time sharing and things like that. Right. But it will be, I think it'll be one of those things that just kind of persistently sticks around, but begrudgingly, right? I mean, because the organization is going to say that's not how the majority of my communications or work happens anymore. It used to back in the 90s and 2000s, but boy, after the pandemic, that's not how we did things. But it'll stick around. It'll stick around.
But I think the only thing I would kind of push back a little bit on with that, Rick, is I think you got to separate voice from the PSTN.
Yeah.
Right. So I agree. Like, voice is always going to be an important modality. I'm just saying that increasingly it won't be riding on the
PSTN.
Yeah.
Right. So
and I agree with that.
And that's the complexity. I mean, Teams out of the box, you can just do, you can do VoIP calls. Like, so it's really the PSTN part was the magic mystical thing. And with Operator Connect, it's a lot easier. But, end users, let's face it, they don't care. They don't know if it's direct routing, Microsoft does the carrier, or Operator Connect. They just click and, make a call, right? So
how cool would it be if we could map a phone number to an IP address? I'm just kidding. Wait, we do it already. That's okay. All right. A couple of things. Let's shift a little bit, Kevin, because there's some really cool things that are rolling out. Yeah. And we think are pretty interesting. And I'd love to get your take on this, because I think I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I think it's going to crack this thing wide open. And it's the shared calling now.
Right.
That's rolling out. I don't think it's rolled out just yet, but the shared calling that's rolling out, where you're going to, I think it's going to allow, phones behind a single phone number, behind a single plan, that's going to be addressed. Frontline workers, it's huge. We have retail customers that have hundreds of locations that I think it's just going to really, because that whole separation of identity based versus a classic PBX or even a cloud PBX where it's not identity based, right? And now I feel like it's a hybrid now you've got your identity based, but they're also opening up the ability to not be identity based by this whole shared calling plan behind a device or a single phone number. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you mentioned two things that I think are really significant. So the first thing is, being able to share a single DID. So it means you only need one DID. Let's say you've got either an auto attendant or a receptionist, and then everybody behind, they can make calls. They don't need a separate calling plan. So you can use kind of the pay as you go plan. And you can, so they can dial out. And that's great because there's a whole bunch, as I said, a whole bunch of organizations where people rarely make or receive PSTN calls. So to pay the $1 or $2, and in some geographies, it's significantly more expensive to get a DID, right? But, in North America, it's $1 or $2 per user per month. I mean, if you've got 100,000 users or 10,000 users, whatever, that's $10,000 a month. And if the people are making calls, that was just wasted money. And so I think increasingly, this allows, the outbound calls, present the main number, but a lot of organizations, even when they had individual DIDs, a lot of them, did that often.
Still did it, yeah.
Because they wanted you to come in. And so I think that's significant. But the other thing you mentioned, Rick, and this is a huge growth opportunity, and another area where I think Microsoft has invested a lot of, effort and a lot of development, and people don't know about it, is frontline workers. And I think Gartner estimates, I don't know, it's 2.5 billion frontline workers, double the number of knowledge workers or desk-based workers, right? We're all technically desk-based knowledge workers. And, if you look at the frontline capabilities, that Teams, they've built a whole bunch of apps, from scheduling and an approvals app to do some workflow stuff, an update app to kind of like at the end of your shift, you kind of say, hey, this is what I got done. And, and even just the whole authentication piece, right? Where you can, authenticate with like more of a phone number, so Microsoft has really added a lot of capabilities, the walkie-talkie app, right? Which doesn't work as well as I would like, but it's pretty cool, right? So, Teams for frontline workers, I think that is an underserved and a tremendous opportunity for partners and for people that understand that, hey, this really works well, and it's a lot of people worldwide. So
it's an exciting, and that's what, again, having the position, and I don't like to plug G12 a whole bunch on these calls, but really understanding the shift in this space, understanding the opportunities that present themselves just like this is a huge opportunity, because you look at that and you do there, what'd you say, 2.3 billion frontline workers? That's crazy amount of frontline workers. It's going to, if you can be first to understand it and first to communicate what you're capable of, because I still go back to the Teams phone as a platform, as a phone system is phenomenal. It is amazing compared to anything that's hanging on someone's wall, and even compared to cloud solutions out there today. It is, I think, far and away the most robust telco system out there, or phone system out there, communications platform out there.
Yeah.
And so being able to ingest those frontline workers now and provide services for those, it's going to create a whole new opportunity for organizations that are in the delivery. I mean, it's like you're helping, it's like the gold rush, right? People, made a bunch of money on the picks and axes on the way to find some gold, and no one, very few people found some gold, right? But it's like the same thing. I think it's like, if we can help those customers get to the communications gold, right? You help those customers get there. We're selling the picks and axes along the way to make it easy for them, but they're going to get there. These guys are going to get there, because it is just a massive shift in the space right now. Yeah. Okay. Well, so shared calling. Oh, go ahead, Brandon. Sorry.
Yeah. Real quick. I'm going to pile on to, and I'm going to air quote legacy PSTN, because it's not technically legacy PSTN, but you mentioned frontline workers, and you talk about now this convergence of mobile capabilities within the Teams phone system. And I think that's going to also, I think it's going to be slow to roll here in the United States, and maybe even somewhat in Canada. But I think we're going to start to see, especially for those remote, think oil fields. Like I'm from almost Canada. I'm from Montana, where there's very remote locations for oil rigs and whatnot. And I think you may not have a good data connection, but you might have a decent cell connection to bridge that phone call. And I think there's probably a coming show where Rick and I are going to start talking about our thought process around the strategy of bringing that mobile convergence into the Teams phone system. And that's I believe, going to be game changer as well.
Yeah, no. So like, you bring up a great point, and this is maybe for another show or whatever, but this is what I think people don't, it's hard to keep up and understand all this, but like Teams phone mobile, one of the absolutely significant things about it is that I can make a call, because it's, in places like Montana or the remote area, Northern Ontario. Ontario is huge, right? Yep. So, because it's a cellular voice call, and carriers effectively apply QoS, quality of service. It's not exactly the same thing, but they favor cellular voice calls, as opposed to, sure, I could bring up, if users have voted and they use the native dialer, quite frankly, but even if you brought up the Teams app, I mean, that's, that's over the data channel. So having the cellular voice call, it's way more reliable. Think about if you're ever trying to use Wi-Fi in a big conference, it just doesn't work.
Doesn't work, yep.
But cellular voice does a couple of things. It works in a much larger coverage area. It works at high concentration, because it's been engineered to do that. And like the Teams client on mobile is fantastic when you're stationary. But cellular voice is designed to do all those fancy handoffs when you're moving, right? So most of the time, like, I think people underappreciate, like, all the mobile clients have come a long way, but the teams, like, if you don't have Wi-Fi and you want to do a cellular, like, data call and you're stationary, it works great. You can do video, you can do screen share, you can do all kinds of, like, things on your mobile device. But, and you don't recommend this, but if you were doing a video call while you're driving, hopefully as a passenger.
Disclaimer, don't do that.
Yes, exactly. Do not do this unless you're a passenger. So the data network doesn't deal with the handoffs as well as the cellular voice. So I think Teams Phone Mobile, and as a last bonus, well, for compliance, you can do all the compliance recording or whatever, but that's not all industries, right? But presence. So when you're on your mobile phone and you make a call, people know that Kevin's on a call, right? So, and it just works, right? So I think Teams Phone Mobile, I think Verizon is the only carrier in the US that supports it right now. In Canada, we have Rogers. Microsoft is, said they're looking to expand geographies first, and then they'll kind of go back and bring in other kind of competing carriers. But I think Teams Phone Mobile is an underappreciated, fixed mobile convergence solution that is today.
I think if we took a poll, most listeners are going to not even realize that this topic we just talked about is even a thing. That's my opinion.
And that's the thing I was going to say is, like, the opportunity that these partners have and carriers have is right in that whole discussion, in the details of that discussion, because at the end of the day, Microsoft makes it very difficult for people to understand things because there's just so much coming out. Yes. There's so much coming out. So if you look at and I am begrudging, I'm going to say this, but if you look at, let's say, a Zoom, I could go over to Zoom and I can click, buy mail. Here you go. And I'm all set. I'm out the door and I've got a shopping cart and whatever, and my devices are on my way, whatever it may be. Yeah. And you're done. Right. Whereas Microsoft, creates this environment to, the flexibility is there. There's, 71 different PSTN providers sitting in Operator Connect today. Yeah. Right. Mobile is rolling out, and the mobile and not just mobile from a network perspective, from a fixed mobile convergence, but now the eSIM providers, like I think it's Tango out there, right?
Tango, yeah, they've got a cool solution. Yeah,
they do. I think we're going into trial with them in the near future here. So it's like, so we have to stay on top of this so that we can present this whole sort of simplistic approach to things, because it does get in the weeds. It gets like a data room that's not been touched by a real IT guy, right? You're in a data room and there's wires going everywhere. And so it's interesting. That's what creates this opportunity, is you've got to have someone that packages stuff up and translates it for the businesses to understand, here's how we deliver the service, right? They just make it difficult, and we need to make it easy.
No, 100%, Rick, because it's all about business outcomes, right? Like, all this fancy, like, we love all the fancy stuff, and Microsoft is like, hey, if we have one way to solve this, let's make 5 ways to solve the same thing. Like, look at, like, task management. They're trying to bring it together, but, Planner and To-Do and Outlook task, and they're eventually consolidating it. But I feel like, Microsoft is a huge organization. There's multiple teams that are creating, overlapping solutions. And, like, that's really where the partners can step up and decode this, and then bring, I think, Brandon, you said solutions. I like to say business outcomes. I remember I was talking to a beer manufacturer or whatever, and, about unified communications. This was many years ago, and I'm all hyped about it. Like, look at this is so exciting. I think it was back in the OCS R2 days, right? And I still remember this because this was like I'll say the CIO. He said, Kevin, how is this going to help me sell more beer? And I just kind of looked like a deer in the headlights, because I was super psyched. I knew everything about OCS R2. But I didn't have a good answer to that. And so from that day, that's probably 20 years ago, I think about it. It's like, okay, all of this is fantastic. How is it either going to drive more revenue or reduce costs for organizations? And I think, Microsoft gives you 1,000 different tools. And if you put the right combination together, then there is a very compelling answer to how it can drive revenue or reduce and optimize costs, right? But that's really, Microsoft doesn't necessarily do that for you. I think that that's really where the partner community really shines, is you decode that and you bring the particular grouping of things to your customers, and then it's a great win-win-win.
It is. You sit at the crossroads of tech and business productivity, right, or business, outcomes, right? You sit, yep, and that crossroad is a really interesting place to be, because, if you're a guy like me who loves business, I love business. I love business, right, models. I love, revenue models. I love all that stuff. But tech is something that, I've just done. And so it makes it super exciting to be able to show what we can deliver. And never before, I don't think there's ever been a time, and maybe there has been, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's ever been a time where you can create something for an organization and witness instantly the direct impact that it has.
Right.
Right. I mean, you can, and you can see it sort of cascade. You put a new phone system in for somebody. Okay. There's some great benefits, but really the tools that you have right now, and I think about the upcoming sort of, Copilot, the upcoming sort of, or Microsoft's, chat, ACS, or, Azure Communication Services, yeah, all these different tools that are out there now, that if you can put together and start addressing a business process, yes, you can see immediate impact. Power Automate, super simple stuff to, yeah, kind of visualize for us, because we understand what it looks like and means. But when you go to a law firm, how do you help this law firm sort of bring on new clients, right? We've talked about a scenario that we worked on to do that, but that's exciting stuff. Like, you can see the business outcome shine almost instantly now with the tools that are at your hands. And so you tie it to communications in a way. I mean, whether Brandon's doing a Power Automate script for messages, for organizations in Teams Phone, or whether now you get to unload Copilot to go search for sentiment analysis and deliver sort of results to a not a contact center manager, but even some sort of manager that they've got an upset client, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's these tools that make it super exciting for businesses these days.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, I love Power Automate. Rick can't even message me anymore on Teams, because I have this Power Automate set up to send my message straight to our support org. I'm like, I already know he's asking a question, so go bug someone else.
Yeah,
that's a joke.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Microsoft, when they announced Teams or whatever, it was always like the hub where work gets done. I always thought, Teams, like, Microsoft is good at like building platforms, and Teams is a platform, and really it's a process automation platform that, yes, it can include all kinds of communications, including voice, but ultimately, it's about expediting the business processes. And to your point, Rick, it's super exciting. Like, that's why I love technology. It's like, you do something, then you stand back. And I always say, like, technology should either entertain. I started writing video games way back in the Commodore 64 days. There, the goal was to entertain. Then I did a whole bunch of educational software, or to educate, or just really to, improve the productivity of the business flow, right? And you can literally, to your point, you can put this in place, and then you can stand, and this is my favorite day, is you just watch people going about their day. And, granted, it's not curing cancer or solving world hunger, but it is making people's lives incrementally better, what they do every day. And that, to me, that's why I'm passionate about technology. And Teams as a platform really gives you, through the whole Power Platform, the tools to be able to do that. And then the thing that I would say is, you can watch it, but also, I love that Microsoft has really instrumented the whole Office 365 platform, so you can really get at a whole bunch of the behavioral analytics as well as the sentiment, analysis, right? So behavioral analytics of what people do, sentiment is what they say. And so you get a little bit of that, it pops up, says, hey, was this a 1 to 5 star? But hopefully you're also using Microsoft Forms. Hopefully you know that exists, and you do some surveys to say, hey, did you get enough training? Do you do you like whatever we've deployed? Do you want a desk phone? Whatever it is, because I think analytics can be that compass, tells you are you heading in the right direction, and it can be that ruler to say, are we making progress as fast as we want? Because we all try to deploy the right technology, but sometimes it takes a couple kicks at the can. You try something, you can put in wonderful, Teams room systems. Maybe they're not getting the usage that you want. Well, maybe people are intimidated by it or they're not sure. And so you use the analytics to kind of circle back and say, hey, we thought we did a good job, but now we need to tweak it, right? And I feel like that automation platform combined with those analytics, man, you can really do some wonderful things to improve business outcomes.
Agreed. It's interesting. You said a couple of things. I'm going to come back to the apps for just a minute when you talk about Commodore apps. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. But there was something that you said. Let me talk about the apps first because I got all messed up on that one. So the Microsoft App Store, or I don't even know what it's called. Is it the Teams Store, the Teams apps?
Teams
I think
apps,
during their quarterly sort of review, they put out like 1,900 apps in the store. Have you gone into the app kind of place and kind of figured out what are some cool apps? What are some things people are using? But to me, I look at that and I go, if you think about the number of apps that are sitting in Apple or Android stores, right, to make consumers productive or entertain, and then you think about 1,900 apps sitting in the Teams, what a way that has to go. It's like there is such an opportunity to go create productivity tools. This again, either partners or developers or other companies to go develop these tools that help organizations, and what a way to get it to an audience and get it in early, because there's only 1,900 apps. It doesn't seem like very many to me.
No, and I think okay. So I have a whole bunch of thoughts because
that's exciting.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm excited about this because there's the good and bad news story, which is so as part of a kind of a pandemic passion project, we created a Teams store app called Trivia Engine. So Trivia Engine uses gamification to do knowledge reinforcement. So it's like, you do all the boring training and then people forget it. So this is like a game show format, and you create your own content and then reinforce. So think of it like if you got salespeople or customer service people trying to keep up with technology, knowing the specifics helps you sell more or provide better customer service. So I previously had created this, like I'll say 10, 15 years ago, using a Flash and SQL Server and Active Server pages. It was more business to consumer. So during the pandemic, I'm like, as I said, I started doing software development back in the Commodore 64 and VIC-20 days, writing video games. So I'm like, hey, this would be cool. I'm going to bring this to make it be a Teams app, single sign-on, a true Teams app. So a couple things. When we started, there was no way to monetize it. And now they've got the whole, you can subscribe. It's too clunky. And so this is part of the problem where, like, on the Apple, App Store, it's easy to buy it. It's like simple. The Teams one, it's still, and this is Microsoft. It's got permissions. It pops up dialog boxes that scare people. Yeah. And here's the problem. Most of the large organizations have turned off all third-party apps, including Microsoft. I have a lot of good friends at Microsoft. I'm like, hey, try Trivia Engine. They say, sure.
Never mind.
Where's that?
And here's the deal. They don't even know who, they work for Microsoft, relatively senior people. They don't even know who to contact, right? And so I think that, this is, Microsoft is balancing out the whole privacy and security, and that's a great thing. But I think it makes the apps be a little more complicated. And a lot of those apps, even though there's a small amount, a lot of them are just what I call veneer apps. They're really like for example, you can get WebEx in Teams. It's WebEx. It just has like a little veneer thing that exists. Now, what I would say, we talked about Operator Connect and carriers. Every carrier, like if you have a tile in Operator Connect or whatever you said, 71 or whatever the number is, that's like your brand. You're just one of the 71. If you think about it, if you had some value add and you could create a Teams app that did something like a lot of that Operator Connect, you click on it and it still just says, it just brings you to a website. It's
Oh yeah,
not
contact us or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
They send you an email and fill out a form, and it's like it's all manual. If you could provide, whether it's an analytic or I don't know, a redirect number, whatever you're going to do, provide a Teams app as a carrier, I think, and be part of the 1900, I think you would stand out a lot more. So yeah, definitely, Rick, a great opportunity. But, Microsoft, it's funny because they recommend a setting where they allow third-party apps, like you control it in Azure, one of the positions, but it defaults to, unfortunately, only allowing first-party apps, which is great for Microsoft. And then, and I was a little disappointed with this, back in March of this year, they wanted everybody to do the Teams preview, the new Teams client. Well, that's fantastic. It didn't support, and it still now doesn't support third-party apps. So, it's hard to get the ISVs to invest the time. And on some days, I made the decision. I was the technical architect. I said, we're going all in on Teams. It's not a web app. The developer said, should we make it be a web app? I'm like, we're going to make it be a Teams app. It works in Teams. And I'll tell you, every other day, I think I made the wrong decision because people that want to use it, their administrator has turned that off. So I think Microsoft has work to do there.
Well, let me address it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, but there's also, there's this teeter-totter that we sit on, or this balance that, like when you look at a corporation, there's so many factors that play into this idea of an app, right? They've got compliance and DLP policies that they might have to follow. And then you think about a business, you want to keep your worker, your contributors focused on their job, right? So if they open up that app stream to, hey, go grab this or go try that, I'm not advocating one way or another. I'm just saying, like, it's hard to compare it to an Apple store or a Google Play store, in that as a consumer, I control the destiny of the garbage or the quality of the app I put on my phone.
Right.
Versus from a business perspective, and I know this just running the technology side of a company, of you have to make some hard decisions. You have to decide, am I going to let, even from a computer perspective, am I going to let solitaire sit on someone's computer or not? Just the same way as, am I going to let a certain app be accessible via Teams? So just things for people to keep in their mind.
Yeah, just real short, and then we'll go to Rick. But it's like, I have a belief that you hire people and then you trust the people to do their job. And so I'm a big believer in, you basically allow people within reason, obviously you got to protect them, and cybersecurity is important, but I try not to advocate super lockdown. But anyway.
No, I'm an advocate of, if you're playing the game on the computer, at least I know what you're doing. If you're on your phone, I don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And I'm not saying I'm micromanaging. What I'm saying is I can govern the security of what you're doing on my compliant based device, versus your productivity is lost if your head's down looking at your phone.
Yeah. No, good point.
I had more of a, and I'm going to pivot from that for just a second. I had more of a comment, Kevin, to your whole earlier. It was the one that escaped me for a minute. It was related to statistics and automation, right?
Yes.
Our statistic. One of the things that I do love about Microsoft Teams Phone is the ability for us to go measure what or create statistics on the behavior, right? That's exactly what you talked about, the behavior.
Yeah.
One of the things that, as a UCaaS provider, as an example, on our legacy platform, our UCaaS platform, we don't show organizations the flow of the behavior of the customer. We don't show, of the calls. We show them, okay, we can pull stats down, but it's not really the same thing as the behavior. Who got stuck, right? Who got stuck here? If you created a complex IVR solution, we may think that we've created the best IVR solution, but in our Power BI sort of stats page, you can see the behavior, obviously not just the statistics, but the behavior of, are people getting stuck, so that you can create that whole, I'm going to say a bit of a cliche, but the whole frictionless engagement, right? It's like, if you can create a frictionless engagement, that's pretty. So that's one of the cool things that Teams Phone does provide, is the ability for you to pull behavioral stats in a lot of different formats and deliver that to the administrators and the builders of those solutions to help them create a better process or a better solution.
But you have to look at the analytics. This is
You do.
like, I work with so many organizations. They go out, they buy third-party tools, and there's some great third-party tools, especially like if you happen to have some Teams users, some Cisco, Avaya, and a lot of organizations through mergers and acquisitions, they've got kind of multi-platforms that they're dealing with. There's some great third-party tools that do this, but they go buy these tools, and then nobody in the IT group, takes or has the time to look at them. So analytics not looked at provide zero value.
Yeah, exactly. Just to go back to the very beginning of this thing, Kevin, that just kind of reminds me is that, I feel like the reason that organizations have several different platforms, and I hear this preached by the enabler guys, right? So the guys that are enablement. I'm addressing, you've got the Z word and you've got and you've got Teams, right? And I think, to me, I look at that and go, it's just disparate technology that the administrator has kind of, and I'm gonna get hate mail for this, but I feel like the administrators let sort of some of the end users go rogue a little bit and keep some solutions. I've got a couple of attorneys as an example in a law office that, they can't wrap their head around Teams, and they're just gonna keep using Zoom because it's just click and it's super simple for them, and I don't want to learn anything else. I'm just gonna stay on Zoom. And so to me, I look at that and go, I think there just needs to be a consolidation in organizations to a single platform. Like part of every CIO, and again, I could be getting hate mail for this, but part of every CIO's job, I think, is to simplify that tech stack and figure out where you can create not just productivity and cost savings, but create some sort of easy management for you as a technology leader, right? So I look at that stuff and I think I don't like the whole, in an organization split technology. It's because I haven't reined in the people that need to be reined in a little bit.
Yeah. So what I would say is, one of the things we do is we work with organizations strategically to look at, multiple viable options. Because it used to be, I'd say in technology, there used to be, you'd get the requirements and there'd be one right answer. In today's world, there's a lot of leaders of all technologies, a lot of great, solutions. So I believe that there are multiple viable options. And so what you need to do is take those multiple viable options, map them against what's important to the organization. And so, I often say recommendations without requirements is marketing. Like if you say XYZ is the best solution, and I don't even know what your situation is, then I'm just marketing, right?
Right.
But I do think there are reasons, and some of them are, non-technical, but there's politics. I remember we did a strategy for an organization. Microsoft was the right way to go. This was back in the earlier, kind of OCS Link days. But all the executives had Macs. So there was like 12 of the senior executives, and it was like the right solution was Microsoft. However, no one was willing to go tell the executives that they had to give up their Macs, which they loved. And so it became a different solution. And it's like, as long as it's transparent and you realize that, politics are playing a role, hey, that's fine. What's not fine is being a wimp and just saying, I'm just going to let everything, whatever you want goes, because the objective is to find the simplest solution that meets your requirements. That could mean Teams and business to consumer, we're going to use Zoom because maybe that works, right? I hear a lot of people doing that. If that makes sense for your organization, that's fine. Or you pick something else, or a particular, it has to be on-prem because of contractual requirements. Well, you can't run Teams on-prem. So, okay, maybe this group has to be serviced by something else, but it's not, just use whatever you want and one person, that's, to your point, Brandon, that's not where, that's not controlling or managing or even helping the users, right? So the simplest solution that meets requirements, that's what it needs to be. Increasingly for organizations, because of AI and the whole Microsoft cloud, we see huge movements to organizations just doubling down on Microsoft. I mean, Satya for 5+ years has been talking about trust. And now that we're talking about AI, I mean, that basis that he's laid of really convincing people that the Microsoft, your data is your data. We don't train the models using customer data. You know, Zoom just had a big problem over the last.
Oh, yes.
Because they said we don't do it without your consent, but Microsoft says we'll never use your data, right? And so I think different approaches. I think Satya's, laid a great foundation for now. People are saying, yeah, I'm not really sure I understand AI, but I'm pretty sure I trust the Microsoft cloud, right?
Yep, exactly. Well, that's a whole different. I wish we had time to get into the AI and Copilot, because I'm super excited about where the direction's headed, where we're headed. And the last comment I'm going to say, and Brandon can kind of outro us here, but the last thing I'll say is the only reason those executives like the Macs is because they just didn't have to restart their computer, and that was pretty much it. That's the only reason they hang on to those things, so they don't have to restart them.
No, that's a fair point.
Yeah, I was going to say two things. One, it sounds like this is to be continued because there's a lot of good conversations still to be had. So, Kevin, hopefully you'd be willing to join us for another episode down the road. Maybe we talk about AI. Maybe we arm wrestle. Maybe we do something else. But the last thing is, Rick, we have like at least 2 questions in the comments, and you have a headset to give away unless you don't want to give it away. So
right there. No. I'll tell you, I don't know who the basic networks and streaming person is, and they left, but they had a bunch of comments and a bunch of questions there on YouTube. And so this right here, we're going to find out who that person is, and they're going to take home a BH71 Pro from Yealink. It's brand new. It is a sexy headset, almost like that whole Apple thing, because it's so smooth and like look at that thing and look at it. I don't necessarily want to shove it in my. It is. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice device here. So whoever that basic networking and streaming guy is person, we're gonna send that to them. There you go. That's the winner.
Right.
All right. Well, Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. Brandon, I know you did an outro, and so I appreciate that. But I'm going to do an outro too, because I basically just want to appreciate, tell Kevin how much we appreciate him joining us. What a great, lively discussion. This is super fun because it's been long overdue, because we typically have topics long overdue to talk about what's happening in the marketplace and how we are delivering on Teams and how Teams is doing on delivering to the customers. It's all exciting stuff. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye, everyone. That's episode 29. We'll see you in episode 30. See ya.